if so, that would be absolutely terrific. All right, so again, just starting off, I'll start with a quick introduction. My name is Brian Levy, and I am the president of Bridgeport Digital. So Bridgeport Digital, we are a consulting firm that specializes in strategy. And the strategy that we love the most and we concentrate on the most is looking at how we do performance management within the workforce. And so what we do for a living is through lots of different clients is actually look at what are the strategic goals of the organization and how can we move them closer to those strategic goals. So we've been doing that in the Agile arena for the last about 28 years. So we're happy to have you with us and happy to be aboard. Now, as we move on with the webinar, I just want to kind of set the stage and highlight that there is a huge change that is going on in the area of performance management. Oh, and there's another person, Rosa, if you would do me a favor, mute that person, that would be absolutely terrific. But yeah, I want to set the stage and give some background, a little bit of history about performance management and where we are now. And then afterward, discussing the background, we'll switch and say, hey, let's analyze based on where we are right now and how we got here. Is that the right place to be? And should we switch to something that is more productive in the future? So that'll be our goal for the webinar today. So let's start out just looking at the background of performance management. And you can see here, you have this slide that kind of gives some major milestones in the history of performance management and kind of management's role. And I want to point out, it hasn't really changed since the early 1900s. So let me give you some more of this background first. Way back in 221 AD, we find records in the Wei Dynasty in China about how the emperors, who normally they use a lot of nepotism, so they used to appoint their relatives to different political posts, and they actually have records of how they use performance management and rating systems to evaluate different management performance of their family members. And that rating systems that were developed way back in 221 AD, those are the basis of the rating systems that we use today, right? So we started coupling the management and the actual rating performance evaluation way back in 221, right? And then fast forward a little bit. And we fast forward a little bit, I want to actually point out in the 1700s, Adam Smith was actually proposing different ideas for assembly line production. And a lot of his ideas were centered around management designing the system. The thought process behind it was that management knew more about how everything worked than the layperson who was largely uneducated. And so management, because they knew more, they should actually do the research to figure out how everything, all the processes, all the tasks within the organization should work together, right? And then in the early 1800s, we progressed a little bit. And Robert Owen, who was in Scotland, he actually started formalizing the management's job. And the way he actually had management's job was really centered around, after you define what the roles, what the activities, what the tasks are, management should be monitoring those tasks and appraising people at their performance of it. And when they didn't do well, they should actually kind of nudge them along and make sure that they corrected their behavior to make things better.
No, this is Island. Thanks.
All right, so there's one person, Rosa, if you could mute that person who's talking in the background, that'll be great. And I want to fast forward to Frederick Taylor in the 1900s, the early 1900s. He had this theory in scientific management that there was one way to do a job, right? That one optimal way. And management should find that way. And once they found it, they should introduce it to their employees. And then if the employees could master it, you could optimize the entire organization. And as they optimize that task that they were given, you should compensate them accordingly. Right? So it developed this huge tie between compensation and the evaluation of the employee. Right? And most of our performance management systems are based upon that theory. Right? You teach people tasks, you monitor how well they're doing in that task, and the better they are at it, the more you should actually reward them and bonus them as we go forward. And so that's been the predominant theory. Now, in the 1950s, Peter Drucker introduced the concept of management by objectives. And he looked at some early research and goal setting and figured out, hey, if employees have a goal that's bigger than themselves, they'll actually work harder at the task that they do. So what we should do is actually take the goal of the firm, and as you go through subsequent layers in the hierarchy of the organization, you break down that goal into smaller pieces and make sure that there's alignment. But make sure employees know what those goals are so that when they do their tasks, they will be inspired to work toward those goals. Right? Now, again, we're still in this habit of coupling the appraisal of people and how they do. We want to compensate them according to their goal accomplishment, according to the management by objectives, right? So we still have managers evaluating them. And then as they're being evaluated, you're compensating them accordingly and actually giving them feedback as a manager and nudging them toward doing it the correct way. So that's been the pattern for the last 60, 70 years. We focus on task management. We focus on adding in a goal to inspire people, but then having the manager's main job of managing people be evaluation of the person's performance against the standard, having the manager define what that standard is, and then giving feedback to correct behavior that was not conducive or toward the standard. So that's been the history of what we see when we're actually doing the manager's role, right? And the reason I wanted to highlight these things is because what you'll see when the managers are actually going about their tasks and nudging people gently toward doing these items, what you'll notice is that people actually don't respond that great to it, even though that's been the normal practice, right? And I want to actually take some time to introduce you to some of the research around these items so that you'll be able to see the way that we focus on performance management. It actually has not proven to be as successful as we would have hoped, right? Even though we're still doing it, we're still focused on trying to ensure that we nudge people towards the standard that's set by management and evaluating their performance. That pattern has not been shown to actually really be beneficial toward the enterprise. And so, I want to show you a little bit of the research. I'm bringing up my screen, and I want to actually investigate some studies that have been done that are put out in the industry. So, what you're seeing in front of me right now is from Gallup, right? And what's highlighted here, number one, it says number one, performance reviews in most organizations are so bad they do more harm than good. When we did research, and Gallup did this huge study where they looked at different corporations, different organizations, whether it's small and large, and they found the same thing across the board, which is there was no evidence that our current performance management practices by management actually helped performance to improve, which is just astounding. And not only could they find no evidence that it actually helped performance, they actually found the opposite. And you can see here, in about 1/3 of the time, what they found is that the performance management approaches, including the feedback sessions that were conducted by management, actually made performance worse. And that seems incredible because that's the feedback given by management in these performance reviews are the cornerstone of the manager's job. But you can see here, they're saying, hey, it made it worse. And they explain why, right? It says, first, most employers, most supervisors aren't given timely feedback, right? They're actually given feedback, on most performance management processes. In most organizations, they have a semi-annual or maybe a yearly performance review. And so the performance of the individual, the employee, may have been bad or been lacking in some way. And people don't get a chance to actually hear feedback on it until way past the time that they executed the behaviors. So it's not timely, so it doesn't help them change their behavior at all. Hence, it doesn't actually improve performance. In fact, when that happens, most times people just see it as criticism for why they didn't get a raise. So it makes them bitter, right? So now they're mad at their manager. I want to further point out study was done by the council, the executive board, and this corporate executive board is a subsidiary of Gartner, right? And again, this article we're looking at is from the Society of Human Resource Management. And basically what they found out when they did their study was that most people, most managers aren't trained enough to actually do performance reviews in a way that actually help the employees understand what behaviors to correct. And because of that, they found no evidence. And you can see here in the middle, it turns out this mistrust is well founded. Our research shows that individual performance ratings have absolutely zero correlation with actual business benefits. And again, they started monitoring how much time and effort people were putting into performance management. And what they found is that the average manager was spending 210 hours in performance management activities per year. The employees were spending 40 hours per year, right? So we're spending all this money. When you count the money, right? The average organization was spending $2.5 million to $34 million, somewhere within that range, on performance management, and they weren't getting any better results. This is so astounding that when this study came out, companies just started ditching their performance management systems. right? Accenture, Adobe, the companies start ditching their performance management systems left and right because they realized they weren't getting no benefit from it. I want to point out one more thing along this line about the root cause of why they get no benefit out of it. All right, so they started investigating that, and they did some studies, and I'm showing you some articles that was this is predicted or published from the Washington Post, and they had some people that were studying why performance didn't improve, and the long held theories were that people really wanted to improve, and they needed feedback in order to improve. And the theories were that if you gave people feedback, the, they would see that they did something wrong and correct their behavior. But here's what they found. They found that people don't respond well to negative feedback, right? So you tell people they're doing something wrong, it just demotivates them. So they actually perform either the same or worse. And they did some further studies. They said, oh, when we found that out, maybe this is just people that aren't really well motivated. And the other people who really cared about their performance would actually improve. And you can see here, when they did that research, they found out they were wrong. Even people that are highly motivated and really want to do best, they hate criticism just as much. And they get demoralized by it, and their performance falls down. So everyone's performance gets worse when they get feedback from other people. And again, what we've done in our society is we've made the manager primarily responsible for giving feedback to their employees. And what they found is that even people that were extremely goal oriented, they hate negative feedback. And when they get it from their manager, it induces more fear, more animosity than it actually produces feelings of joy and the desire for them to correct. This is actually what happens, right? I'm going to point out, I'm going to point out another passage I just wanted to read out to you. And again, it's describing our current system. I'm going to read this text and see if you can identify it. So it says, perhaps the most prominent single element in modern scientific management is the task idea. The work of every workman is fully planned out by the manager, at least a day in advance. And each man receives, in most cases, complete written instructions describing in detail the tasks that they need to accomplish, as well as the means of doing it. So we plan things out and plan out the details of how we're going to do it, right? And I don't know if you can recognize this, because again, most of our work is centered on tasks, activities that we should perform, right? This citation is from Frederick Taylor's book published in 1911 on scientific management. The basis of scientific management is the tasks, it's activities, right? And that's still the predominant focus of our management today. You just want to figure out what tasks people are doing, when they're going to complete it, right? And that's exactly what's laid out here. I wanted to point this out because, again, we're still using the techniques and the basic principles that were established in the early 1900s when our society has drastically changed. And when I say drastically changed, I mean very drastically changed. I'm going to go back to the slide deck for a second because I want to point out how society has drastically changed, right? And before I point that out, let me mention one thing. Again, all the studies show that 95% of the people on the planet hate performance evaluations, right? And in most cases, the performance management we do has no effect. Lots of times it makes it worse. And I want to explore why. Again, I talked about our society changed since the 1900s, even though we're using the same techniques. Let's talk about how it's changed. 60% of the workforce that we have today are knowledge workers. And by definition, knowledge workers are those that their output isn't a widget. They're not in a factory manufacturing something. Knowledge workers are those who make decisions, right? So their output are decisions. And here's the thing. Most of you and most of your environments, it's not 60%, it's 100% are knowledge workers, right? Again, your architects, your computer programmers, your administrative managers, all knowledge workers. You make decisions. Now, here's the thing about knowledge workers. What signifies or characterizes a knowledge worker is that usually they know more about their domain and their areas than their bosses. Now, take a look at what we've done. Our management style is geared towards defining tasks. But most of the workforce and most of your workforce, they actually produce decisions. And the activities that they do, the tasks that they should do, is dependent upon the decision they make. If they make one decision, they should perform one set of tasks. And if they make a different decision, they should perform a different set of tasks to support that decision. Yet, we still measure and monitor and try to control people based on tasks. Not only that, in most cases, the pace of our environments are so fast that we have to make decisions when we don't have all the available information. So we make a decision, but it'll be tentative. So we'll go in one direction and we'll test out whether our decision is the right one. And if our decision is the wrong decision, what we should do is change it, which means a different set of activities. But here's what the insidious thing that happens in our management style. Because our management styles are so focused on tasks, we have project plans, we have agile lifecycle tools, we have staff meetings that focus on these tasks that you were supposed to do, right? Following the plan. Because we're so focused on it, when we get new information that indicates that the decision that we made should be reversed, we're still being held accountable for the tasks that are in the plan that we produce under the old decision. So we've built in this immunity to change within our organizations by our management style. And because we've tied evaluation to the work and our performance, right? And that determines our bonuses. People are less likely to actually choose the behavior that's conducive toward reaching the goal. Instead, they're incentivized to choose the behavior that's expected from their bosses, even when they know that that behavior, those tasks, those activities should be changed. They'll complain about it at the water cooler. And in my profession, they'll complain about it to me as a consultant. They'll still do it because they want their bonus because it's tied to it, right? That's what's changing our environment. And it's awful. So I want to switch gears. And now that we talked about here's the way management works right now, it's still in that mode of managing tasks, really from the principles in the early 1900s. I want to talk about what the manager's role should be, especially if you're in an agile environment. Overall, as we discussed, we manage knowledge workers. Knowledge workers make decisions. Most often, the decisions are good decisions if they're based in reality and they produce good results. However, some decisions become bad decisions because we don't have all the information to make a right decision. Sometimes because we're basing our decision on bad information, bad assumptions, right? Information that is risky, so it may not be true. Sometimes we actually receive indicators from our environment about progress toward the goal, and we misinterpret it. And if you misinterpret those signals, you'll make bad decisions and continue to make bad decisions. So here's what I'm going to point out. The manager's role in the future should be about disambiguation. They should be trying to focus on clarifying signals from the environment. Now, again, in the past, what happens now, the manager gives feedback to people, and no matter if the feedback is negative, it's been proven that that feedback produces anxiety, it produces fear in organization, it has bad results. Feedback from management has bad results. So what we want to do, the manager should do, is rearrange the environment so that the knowledge workers that work for them can more clearly understand their own progress and get feedback from themselves. And instead of the manager evaluating the employees, because again, most times, if you have knowledge workers working for you, the knowledge workers know more about their jobs than the manager. The manager isn't qualified to actually evaluate their performance. So you want to create an environment where that's not their responsibility. Most times, the people that are most able to evaluate employee performance is the employees themselves. So managers need to actually create the environment where it's easy for other people, other knowledge workers, to evaluate themselves. They give feedback to themselves. They'll take that with uh, more credibility anyway than they would from their managers. And those mechanisms have to be put in place. And that should be the main job of the manager, is to help the decision-making process. Just make sure that people are using a good process for making decisions, that they're using information that is true and valid. They're validating the information to make sure it's correct, that when they make decisions, it's based upon evidence and facts rather than opinions. That should be the manager's role, right? They're changing the environment to make it easier for the knowledge workers to make better decisions. And again, any obstacles, anything that's preventing the employees from either doing their jobs correctly especially as it pertains to getting feedback and an accurate status of how they're performing. The manager should change and they should tackle. That's the main job. So I want to pause for a second here, just to see if there are any questions about anything we discussed so far. And Rosa, if you see questions going into the chat, go ahead and throw them out to me. You know, if people want to ask questions, go ahead and choose the option to raise a hand and unmute yourself and throw out those questions. And Rosa should be able to take those questions and read them out to you, and we'll address those. And again, I'm going to keep going because I don't hear any questions yet, but Rosa, feel free as they come up to go ahead and just interrupt me and throw them out.
Check test.
So I want to, and moving forward, what we found, again, keep in mind, the main job of the knowledge worker and their main output is to make decisions. And there's some more studies that were done. And what we found through these studies is that when people fear, so they're afraid of negative consequences, as most people are under the current systems in which their managers evaluate their performance, when they're in fear, they make bad decisions. Their IQ for decision making actually decreases. And so we want to create an environment where that doesn't happen. So I hear a question on the line from Stephen. So you want to unmute, Stephen, and throw out your question?
Hello, Brian.
Hey, how we doing, Stephen?
Hey, great discussion. One thing that I'm starting to notice to factor in is that we're actually starting to flatten organizations. That's been going on for the past several decades, where I have actually less layers of management and more self-managed teams. So how does this performance management fit into that when there's a foreseeable future where I'm managerless?
Excellent question. Well, you shouldn't be entirely managerless. When we flatten an organization, usually there's still somebody you're reporting to, right? So that you should still have a manager. However, it's not always your manager who should give you feedback and should give you clarification of the goals. So in lots of organizations, what we're seeing is a trend towards more matrix organizations. And so what we need to have is a business process owner identified who can actually put out, here's the business goal that we're actually trying to achieve. And when you're actually doing your goal setting, we want to have an environment where it's a free flow of information and a collaboration between that business owner who owns the organizational goal and you for your goals. And what we found is that, and the basis of most management is in the modern goal setting theories that have been brought out by Latham and Locke, Evan Locke. And we found, and everyone talks about the relationship where if you have goals that are harder to achieve, you get better performance. But there's some caveats if you actually look at the real article behind it. The caveats are that the employee, in order to get higher performance, has to believe that they can actually achieve the goal. And they have to believe that they actually have the skills to achieve it. And if they don't believe that they can achieve it, that is feasible, then they'll actually perform worse. So you need their commitment. So yeah, it has to be this sync up, this collaboration where the employee has to be supremely committed. And again, you get that commitment from the business process owner of the organizational goal, who may not be your manager. So what should happen in modern society is that your manager should actually have a talk and designate, here's the person you should link up with to do your goal setting. And then again, whoever you're doing your goal setting with, they should actually take your cues. They shouldn't just be giving you goals. Because if they give you goals and you don't agree to them, you're not going to perform well. It should be a true collaboration in which you both do it together and both agree. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Good food for thought.
Any other questions out there before I move on? Again, feel free as these questions come up. That sounds like Tasha has a question.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Brian. That was very insightful. And I think you kind of answered my question. I like the way that you, and I have experienced exactly that, the managers had no clue what was going on with the workers and they had to do things. And I felt like the challenge would then be, when you're in a business, management is one thing and the employees are another, and they don't really mix. And so you have your manager meetings and then they tell you, this is the business goal, this is our initiative, now you go and make it happen. And then you go back to your employees and they're like, we can't do that, or not in that time frame, or that's not how it works, or you don't even know what I'm doing. And so I thought the biggest challenge then is that you're in the middle now. So management wants to do these evaluations one way. They want this business goal and they want you to follow it and write your reports and your updates. And then you go back to your employees and find it's just not going to work. So somehow I find that you definitely need to empower the worker. Like, I need to almost go to you first, but sometimes it's always backwards, is this goal doable? How would we do it? How do you do it? What do we need? And so now how you have to, my bigger question was, how do you bridge that problem? Your problem's not with your employees. Your problem's not with a goal can be reached, but maybe not the way or in the time frame they mandate. Now you got to go back and fuss with management, and then they think you're not doing your job. Now you're in the hot seat. I asked you to get this goal done, and now you cannot. I kind of thought I heard the answer when you said you really want to work with your business process owner. If one exists, they're going to possibly be the bridge or the transition, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself and you'll explain, how do you play man in the middle without looking like you're not doing your job when you need someone to really understand the bigger picture? That workflow is not going to work to reach that goal. My knowledge workers cannot work within what you think can happen in 5 minutes, and it's really going to take 3 months.
You've got, you're spot on, Tasha. The main problem, as you described so eloquently, is that, again, we've tasked managers with giving the goals, and lots of times they aren't the most knowledgeable people about what the goals should be. And so, again, the manager's job should be to set the environment to make it easier for you to actually align and work towards accomplishing the organizational goals. They need to designate, here's who should work with you on your goal setting, right? And once they find that business process owner, and it could be them, but it could most likely is someone else. It's not them. Then we should agree with that business process owner on what is feasible, what can be accomplished. And I'm going to throw some caveats in here that are subtle, but are huge as far as the effect. One, again, it can't be a dictatorship. It can't be because this person isn't higher in the hierarchy, then they get to basically dictate what the goals are. It has to be a true collaboration so that you have the commitment. Otherwise, you won't perform well. But here's the kicker. The second thing is that these goals have to be flexible. And what do I mean by flexible? So I may, at the beginning of a quarter, and this happens a lot when people are doing like OKR methodology. Beginning of a quarter, I might set a goal for you, but then the environment changes. And here's what's most evil about it. When you set goals and you set compensation based on the goal, if the environment changes and it becomes evident that you should not continue to strive for that goal, we should have a different goal you should strive for. If my compensation is tied to it, I, as an employee, need to choose between getting that extra 30 grand for the year for my bonus or more, or doing what's best for the company. So what you'll see is in a lot of companies, a lot of the well-performing companies, like Netflix is a good example. They've cut off that tie between the compensation and performance goals. Like you get bonuses based on the organization's attainment of goals, not based on your own goals. So that way, if it makes sense for you to switch goals according to the business needs, you'll just switch. And we have to have this type of relationship in the organization where we don't just create a plan and follow the plan blindly, but you create a pattern and some goals that you're setting, and you're constantly reviewing, are those the right goals? Are they really attainable? And if they're not, you change them so that you can do the best thing for the organization. And getting that relationship with management where we can actually enable that is the key to that manager role. We have to have this viewpoint that I'm going to set standards, set goals, but you should be evaluated by the people that know most or are most qualified to evaluate you. And if the goal no longer makes sense, you should change it. Don't just stick to it because we said it in the past. Does that help, Tasha?
That was amazing. Yeah, definitely. It makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. And again, I don't want to underreport how tough it is to establish that type of relationship, because we're so used to operating in a different way. We're so used to the manager being in charge, right? When really we need the manager to facilitate, make it easier for the employees to do the work. And again, the work for most people is making good decisions, right? So we should be enabling that decision-making process. Again, anyone else if you have questions, feel free to throw them out, right? I'm going to continue, what I talked about last, because we were focused on making decisions, and we know that when we're in fear, we make worse decisions. So what we need to do is manage out the fear in the organizations. How do I manage out the fear? Well, first, I got to eliminate the conflict that comes between decision-making and task-driven behavior by not fixing the tasks inside of plans and pushing people towards adhering to the plan. In fact, I advocate that we don't focus on activities at all. When I invite a plumber to my house to fix my plumbing, some people are so scared that the plumber will cheat them that they'll stand behind them and watch them to make sure they're not pulling the fast one. And for some reason, that makes sense to most people. Me, on the other hand, I know that I called the plumber to my home because I didn't know enough to do the plumbing myself. And so even if I stand behind them and watch him, if he's pulling the fast one and cheating me on something, I'm not going to be able to identify it anyway. So why waste the time? Instead of focusing on the tasks and tracking those and monitoring behavior, management should be focused on the decisions. Track the decisions and make sure that people are making the right decisions. How do we know that people are making the right decisions? Well, one, I should make decisions that actually get me the results. So I should figure out what results should come up. And we should define and agree on what the results mean so I can track progress toward it. If I start getting results and it fits into this threshold, then it means this, right? Then the ambiguity gets drawn out of it. We all have a clear definition on how to do the analysis. And so we can move together in harmony. I see this, it means this. I see this, it reaches this threshold for the results, then it means this. And I know how to make decisions based on that, right? So that's the first thing that managers should do. They should help facilitate before we get the analysis what thresholds, what the results mean, so that we can do the analysis correctly when the time comes, right? That's managing the system. And what I want to point out is that this idea isn't new. Demings talked about this 50 years ago, right? Managers should manage the system, not manage the people. He said that, hey, a leader is a coach, not a judge. They shouldn't be doing the evaluation. For some reason, we're still in the 1900s, focused on the evaluation part, right? But these ideas are not new. I'm going to point these things out. Second thing, I want to make sure that the decisions are aligned. And when I say aligned, there's several ways they should be aligned. The first, I make a decision, and you can see the decision right here that gets made. I want to make sure that the activities that are planned are in line and that they'll produce an implementation of carrying out that decision. And that's normally what people concentrate on. That's probably the least important part. What's more important is there's some foundations for making that decision. There's a set of things we're calling facts, a set of things we're calling assumptions. Elon Musk has once again made famous first principles, right? What's the basis for making your decisions? So managers ought to make sure that the employees, when they're doing their decision making, are actually laying out the basis for the decision and making sure that the decision they make are in line with those assumptions. And furthermore, again, we talked about the manager's job being disambiguation, taking the ambiguity out of things. Every time I have an assumption, there's an element of risk. So we ought to be monitoring what parts of these things are risky, and are we testing these things out? Are we getting evidence that this assumption that we're acting on, as if it were true, is in fact true? Is the basis for my decision making the right basis? Right? So we got to make sure that the process incorporates that, and that the assumptions and the basis for making the decision actually support attaining the goal. So we're going to have this hierarchy of goals, assumptions, and decisions, and then the outputs and activities that derive from it. But the things at the top, the goals and the assumptions and the decisions, are way more important than the activities because they guide the activities. So I want to pay way more emphasis on the things at the top than the things in the bottom of this little hierarchy. And this kind of check on the process for making decisions should occur at every level of the hierarchy, right? We should have this process by which we have a goal and you get information on your current state. And so there'll be a gap between where you are right now and where you want to be in the future. And the process for decision making should be a constant process of bridging this gap. So management should help to make sure that this process is being constantly followed. Again, at our firm, what we found is that even in companies that are using modern practices like OKRs set the goal, but they don't communicate the assumptions or those first principles, the foundations for making decisions around the goals. And unless those things are surfaced, you can't get alignment. So what happens, you end up having these silos. And what you need is to have not only this vertical alignment where the outcomes at the lower level will actually achieve the outcomes at the higher level. And that's what OKR is focused on, is that breakdown. But that's not enough. If there are foundational items that we're using, these assumptions, these mental models that we're using to achieve the goal, that define our approach, those items need to be consistent going vertically down the organization, but also across, right? This department over here ought to have assumptions and mental models that are compatible with other departments. If we're producing a car and I got a department that produces, in charge of the number of cars that get produced in assembly, and they're thinking we're going to make 10,000 cars, I darn better make sure that the department next door that makes the doors for the cars have a production target around 10,000. If their production target is 2,000, if that's the assumption they're going with, your organization is going to be in trouble. So we got to make sure that these things align, right? Which means we need to express it. Most times in today's society, they aren't expressed. So they aren't communicated. You can't analyze it unless it's written down and you can talk about it, right? So these are some of the things that need to happen in order to make management, to make our organizations more successful. Again, manager's role, it's just making sure that they manage the environment, that they concentrate on helping with the transparency in the environment and any other impediments to decision making. That's the manager's role. And that's what's necessary because, again, you're not managing, in most cases, people that are building widgets. Most of you are managing people that are making decisions, right? So the management techniques and management focus needs to be entirely different, right? I would say that, when we start looking at the day of a manager in modern day times, there should be an over preponderance of time being spent on goal setting and helping to facilitate acceptance criteria around the goals. There should be a big amount of time being spent on helping to flesh out what the mental models are and helping people communicate those mental models to each other to make sure that they're aligned. Right? And that's not what happens today. Right? So I'm suggesting that especially in agile environments, performance management needs to radically change. Now, we're approaching the end of the hour. So hopefully this was informative for you. If you want more information about it, we have another webinar coming up. And I apologize, I got the wrong date on this slide. The next webinar isn't the 4th, because that's today. It's actually the 18th. So it's going to be 2 weeks from today. And that day we're focusing, it'll be on performance management. We're going to focus on innovation and talk about the ways in which right now our current management styles, they manage innovation out of the workplace. So we want to show you how to get it back, how to correct it. Additionally, we have some trainings that are coming up. All right, so we have a training coming up on the 19th that's about Agile performance management with Scrum at Scale. So we actually go into depth, 2-day course where we actually really focus on here's the details of how we actually manage a modern workforce, all right, and how your techniques and how you do that management should change. We also have a PMI ACP course coming up. That'll be in the 26th, and 26th through the 3rd, coming up on here's how you integrate project management with these modern techniques for performance management. And then, of course, if there's ever a need to where you need assistance, because most organizations are not able to actually solve these problems just by doing training, right? Most organizations actually need more involvement from others. We're happy to help you with that consulting work. And so, if you need some additional assistance, please reach out to us. You can go to our website, www.bridgeportdigital.com, and leave a message about getting in contact with us. Additionally, if there are, again, any other questions you have, even though our webinar is going to be officially over in about 60 seconds. So I want to thank you for attending. I'm going to stay on the line for at least another 15 minutes or so. You can unmute, and if there are any questions that we want to tackle that you didn't feel comfortable or didn't get a chance to ask about, just go ahead and throw them out now. But again, 10 o'clock, so I'm going to thank you all for your attendance. We'll officially end the webinar at this point. I'll keep the line open in case there are any questions that you have on any of the material we've covered or anything about how to accomplish performance management in this new Agile world. So opening up for questions at this point.
No questions. I just wanted to say it was great. It was really insightful. I'm not just saying that. I really mean it.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, it's actually really strange. I'll tell you guys a little story. We stumbled upon this because, again, as a company, we do a lot of Agile and digital transformations. And one of the major themes we found from company to company, organization to organization, people kept talking about this frozen middle, this resistance of management and doing these Agile transformations.
Yes,
and we're trying to figure
absolutely.
out, why does that happen, right? And we kind of, as we went into it, we fell into, this happens all the time because they're being managed and told to hold people accountable for activities when really the activities that people should accomplish should change based on the decisions they're making. Right. And by having the people to actually lay out, here's the goals you're going for, the assumptions, the decisions you're trying to make, and then the activities, we have been able to go to different organizations and just double productivity in short periods of time. So yeah, we wanted to share it with everyone else.
Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Steve Mills. You had a chart. I had bad connection, so I kept dropping. But you had a chart that kind of went through the things that I guess management needs to enable. So I think one was the objectives, the other one was assumptions. I didn't capture what was after that.
I'm going to put it back on the screen just so you can take a good view of it. Oh, no worries. Oh, so you got the goals, the outcomes that we want to accomplish. We've got the foundations or assumptions that you're using to reach those goals, right? Because there has to be some basis for it. And then you have the decisions or your hypothesis about how to actually do that approach. And then the fourth one is the outputs and activities. And so what we found out, the best way to handle everything we found is by having this hierarchy actually written down and visible.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's visible and you have an environment that's safe, if I'm basing my decision on an assumption that's not true, if it's visible, other people can see it and tell you it's not true. Right? So what you want to do is you want to harness. Oh, sorry. What's that? You want to harness the wisdom of the crowd, and we know it works. Everyone's watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they have the option to ask the audience, and 90% of the time, the audience was correct. The wisdom of the crowd works, and so you want to enable that.
Yeah, I'm going. If you don't mind, I'm going to use this because I have several areas of decisions really that we need to make, and this gives us a good framework that kind of really makes it visible. It says here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's some of the assumptions that we have, so that will help everybody understand each other's view of the elephant, if you will. And then we also are going to say, well, here's the decision or the hypothesis that we're going to test out and the output and activities. So I think this is a very helpful tool for me to use, and I'll definitely take advantage of it. Thank you, Brian.
Oh, no worries. I'm glad it's helpful. And I'll tell you that at my company, what we do is we've gone away from the other kind of meeting and agenda type formats. Every agenda for a meeting has this format. You start out with what's the goal we're trying to achieve? That should be the context around this meeting. And what do we believe to be true? Right? And let's print them out so that in the meeting, if any of those things are false, first thing we're going to do is actually tackle that. Because if we don't agree on that stuff, then of course you want to agree on the decision that's being made. And of course you want to agree on the activities to do. Right?
Yes.
So we use this format for everything.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. No worries. The other thing I want to point out, I talked about the wisdom of the crowd. The other thing that we tend to do with our clients is we are really big on surveys. So we hook up the survey tools to our Agile lifecycle management tools, and we let people go ahead and remark about everything. So we use a survey tool, and anything that's in there, the goal, the assumptions, decisions, activities, people can use their name or even anonymously comment with their approval or disapproval for any of these items they're investigating. We're finding that as we progress in this knowledge worker economy, that the major impediment to success isn't we aren't doing the right techniques, right? People have mastered their craft. It's that we're making the wrong decisions. So anything we can do to enable that is what we focus on. Any other big questions that we have here? Somebody actually asked a question about a recording, and so we'll probably try to work on this weekend. Make a recording, take the recording, doctor it up a little bit, and make it available to all the attendees. All right. If there are no other questions, I'm gonna take off. Again, I thank you all for attending, especially the ones that stayed on after to ask some additional questions and listen to additional answers that came in. Again, in 2 weeks, we're gonna have another one of these. Please reach out. We're having these because we're actually at a point where we're accepting new clients. We were booked up for a while, but we're actually accepting new clients because our organization is growing. So again, if you have organizations that are doing agile transitions, you need training. You notice your performance management system isn't working. You got new managers. We are open for doing that. We're actually finding that we're having a lot more business in coaching executives. So if you have executives and new managers that need development, go ahead and reach out to us. Let us know, and we will do what we can to help out. But with that, there are no other questions. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and hopefully we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
Awesome job. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.